What's up, guys? I didn't really plan on doing this, but I just got to talk a little bit more about the Aero package and what's been going on in NASCAR. I'm sure you guys have noticed I don't really do race reviews. I did a bunch of them, but I just kind of do it when I feel like it because there might be something important to talk about or something that's not just the race. And the last bunch of times I did a race review or something, it was really in relation to the Aero package because that's really the big deal this year, right? That's what everyone's focused on, and that is a big change. And the last video I did, I wanted it to be the last time I talked about it because I did say that my mind was made up about the Aero package and I saw enough. I didn't need to see a lot more. I didn't think I was going to see something that was going to make me change my mind about the Aero package, which is, I would say, I'm 90%. I'm not a fan of this package. That being said, I will say that on occasion it has provided some great racing. Um, for me, if I had to pick one race that really impressed me that I could point directly to the Aero package and say that it's because of that, it's the Talladega race. Uh, I hate restrictor plate races, pack racing. I never been a fan of it. But taking that into account, the last Talladega race was a race I actually enjoyed watching. I actually sat and watched the entire race from beginning to end, and I was thoroughly entertained. And you can't ask for much more than that when it comes to restrictor plate racing. There's a lot of reasons I've talked about that I just don't like pack racing. I think it's a manipulated form of racing. In other words, there is less involvement in terms of driver skill, and it's all about aerodynamics and other things related to physics and downforce and all that stuff. Things that are, for the most part, out of the driver's control. And you can't really succeed without help. So it's not just about you individually, it's about you and whoever helps push you or whoever you can get a draft off of. All of these things have to come into play just to get you from point A to point B, which is the goal to get to the front. But outside of Daytona and Talladega, every other race has historically been about, tire wear, throttle control, seat of the pants driving, horsepower. This year, it's just NASCAR listened to everybody who went crazy last year after the All-Star race, and I warned everybody. I said, everybody's like, oh, we need this every week. Well, guess what? NASCAR listened. I've always told you guys, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. And you got it. And NASCAR approached this Aero package as a one-size-fits-all solution. That was their biggest mistake because all of these tracks are different. Even these quote-unquote cookie-cutter tracks, mile and a halves, they're not all the same. They're all different. Kentucky, Kansas, Chicago, Texas, Vegas, they're all different. Atlanta, none of them are exactly the same. The configuration's different, the banking, even the track. Some tracks are more worn than others. There's a lot of things that come into effect at these quote-unquote cookie-cutter tracks. So this idea that this Aero package was going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, to whatever problem NASCAR thought they had. You know, you got to blame the fans too, because they were screaming about how bad the racing was. I wasn't one of those people. Now, yeah, there are races that the cars really stretch out, or the leader gets away from everybody, and you know it's not as good. But if you look at the history of NASCAR, it's always been that way. So the past couple of years, I noticed there was this sudden, like, oh my God, everything's so horrible. And so I just didn't think it was that bad. I'm not saying the racing was great. The biggest issue, and I think that was what people were kind of alluding to, was this aero push, dirty air type of thing, where it was hard to pass the leaders. And, you know, track position was vital at most places. But what NASCAR did was they made the problem worse. Yes, the cars are closer together. They're closer in a pack. But is the racing better because of that? No. And if you just look at this race at Michigan, you had, and a lot of people said it was like a miniature Daytona. Is that a good thing? Not to me. You saw conga lines like you see at restrictor plate races. You saw that if you got out of line, you fell back to the back. You saw cars almost wide open the whole time around. And worst of all, you saw leaders that couldn't be passed. One guy in particular. And yes, Joey Logano had the best car, clearly. But almost the entire race, he had a car within a car length from his bumper. Almost for the whole race. And at many times, cars got right up to his bumper. But they couldn't pass. They hit a wall. They stalled out. Wasn't this package supposed to resolve that? And this is what I've been telling people. The problem, they just made the problem worse. So drafting is even more, it's there. You see these cars get big runs, but as soon as they get out of line, it's like there's a parachute on the car, and the cars just fall back again. And the only way you make a pass is if you dive bomb somebody and then just force the car up in front of the leader and hope you don't cause a wreck. And we saw that a lot yesterday. If people found that interesting or exciting, that's you. I'm not one of those people. I think that you took a lot out of the driver's hands. I mean, these drivers, I guarantee you, if they felt the freedom to speak out, they would admit they hate this package. There's no way they could like this package when you're running wide open and you still can't pass people. Yeah, there was passing from maybe after the first 4 or 5 cars back. Yeah, because you had people pushing from behind. It was different. But that leader still has a huge advantage. And to watch Logano keep that car out front all day long. And yeah, he's a great driver, but man, nobody's that good. Where you got cars on your tail, on your bumper all day long, and they can't pass. They can't make that move. And he didn't run all the way to the bottom. He didn't run all the way to the top. He kept that car somewhere in the middle. So that dirty air created a wall. And anyone behind him just couldn't get past beyond the bumper. Maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the whole day, somebody almost kind of was able to get in front of him, but never really clear him. How is that exciting? And if you look from the leader all the way, almost the entire field, guys were within a couple seconds of the leader. So if you go all the way back to the top 20 cars, maybe 3 seconds apart in total from the leader all the way to mid-pack. So they got what they wanted. They got exactly what they planned was pack racing, and you got it. For the most part, no, it wasn't like Talladega and Daytona exactly, but you still had the same problems that you had to stay in line so that you don't lose positions. And whenever you tried to make a move, if you didn't have help, you would fall back like a rock. And at many times, even when you had a guy behind you, it wasn't enough. That's terrible. And I didn't say anything. For a bunch of races, I sat back and I watched. Yes, we did get some good races as well. And there's been a lot of good races this year. So I'm not saying that all these races were terrible. But what I am saying is that people jumped to these huge conclusions about how awesome this package is whenever we got a good race. But then when you get a shitty race, they kind of, it's you can't have it both ways. Now, in my opinion, it's not all about the Aero package. Like I said before, each of these tracks are different. And the conditions that were run at particular races were different. Early on this year, I said that the Atlanta race might be a decent race. And it turned out to be a pretty decent race. It wasn't as good as like what we saw at Kansas or a couple of other places, but it was good for Atlanta. But it was tire wear. It was that lack of grip that people, after the first 2 laps, they couldn't hold the car wide open. So you didn't have this aero dependency. You didn't, it was like old school racing. But it was because of the conditions, the track temperatures. All of that stuff comes into play, tire wear. Atlanta's a very worn track. So it produced a decent race. But I guess people walked away from and saying, hey, it was a good, decent race, and it must be because of the Aero package. I thought it was in spite of the Aero package. Now, yeah, the Aero package does play a big part. But people are ignoring the other aspects. When you look at Kansas a couple of weeks ago, and everyone is raving about that race, and me personally, yeah, I think that might have been the best race all year. I loved it. It was awesome. But people quickly placed all the emphasis on the Aero, and it's like, remember that was a night race. The track temperatures were cooler than normal. So you had tons of grip. Guys were right, it's crazy. It's Kansas. It's a little bit smoother of a track than, let's say, Atlanta. There's a lot of things that came into effect. And for that particular night, under those particular conditions, everything came together and it provided a great race. What happens when they go back to Kansas and it's fucking 90, 95 degrees and the sun is beating on the track? You're going to get a completely different race. I promise. So, then we seen Pocono, which was pretty bad, and Michigan was horrible. And earlier this year, you saw California. It's like, these are the tracks where this package was supposed to create great racing, and it's not. So they kind of got what they wanted as far as pack racing, but the leader still has a huge advantage. If anything, they made it worse, because now guys were taking only 2 tires, and it was like tires didn't really matter that much. It was all about track position. And you saw guys when they fell back to maybe 10, 15, whatever, they struggled. But once they got within maybe the top 10, top 8, they could kind of fight their way to the front, but not all the way to the front. That's pack racing. It's just, I don't know, man. Maybe it's just me. I don't find this particular type of racing exciting. And people, they wanted this. NASCAR, the thing that gets me is NASCAR, if anybody should know better, it's NASCAR. Because they're even using this Aero garbage at short tracks. This has no business at short tracks. They ran it at Richmond. They ran it at Bristol. They're running it in places where, in Phoenix, where you shouldn't need to fiddle with this stuff. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to talk about. I'm sick of this Aero package, and I think people are. You guys got to wake up, man. This is not a one size fits all solution. I love this package for Talladega, Daytona, and even though we had a great race at Kansas, I don't know if that's a solution. I still believe that there's too much downforce. What does it matter if this car punches a big hole in the air and these cars get a huge run if once they get up to somebody's bumper, the car stalls out? So yeah, it gives you that yo-yo effect. It allows you to pull up to people but not really pass unless you make an aggressive dive bomb. And you saw it all day. A lot of guys were trying to go under, way to the bottom, but they could never complete the pass. Yeah, a couple of guys were able to do it. One guy almost got in a wreck because he had, you got to try to force your way back in line or you'll fall back. I don't know what else to say about this Aero package. I told you guys, there's nothing else I need to see. It is what it is. This is not working. And I'm afraid that these guys are working on that Gen 7 car with this Aero package in mind. And I hope NASCAR is not going full bore into this direction. I don't know what to say. I think people complained a little too much about the racing in the past couple of years. It hasn't been all great, but we did get some good races here and there. If you look at NASCAR, even in its heyday, every race wasn't great. Some races were so-so, others weren't that good at all. But you don't know what you're going to get. And like I said, it really depends on a lot of factors. Track conditions, temperature, tire wear, all these things come into play. With this Aero package, I cannot stand this wide open throttle racing. You just took a huge tool away from drivers. It's supposed to be about seat of the pants feel, where that car is on a knife's edge, where throttle control comes into play. That's where driver skill comes into play. I want to see these guys use their skill. I want to see these crew chiefs and these teams make adjustments to these cars to help the driver throughout the race. I don't want to see this wide open throttle bullshit. What else can you do when you're driving wide open throttle and you know you can't pass the guy in front of you? That's not fucking racing. That's not what makes racing exciting to me. I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with me. You're not going to like what I'm saying. And the reason I don't talk about this every week and I don't do these race reviews every week is because I don't want to keep harping on this. But this Michigan race made me say, I got to get this off my chest. And I don't know, man. I'm really scared about where NASCAR is going. And if this Gen 7 car is going to be an extension of this package, It doesn't look good. You can't have, there is no one size fits all solution to these tracks. They're all different. And I think the answer is less downforce. I don't want people to be able to run wide open in corners. That's where the difference is between cars that are, good, you make an adjustment, driver talent, some guys are able to get that extra tenth or two out of their car. Now, it's just people driving wide open throttle, and some guys do have a knack for it, and I'm not saying it doesn't take talent, but these guys, these drivers, they have, in small ways, they've let it be known that they're not crazy about this. Now, they're not really coming all out and just blurting it out because NASCAR will come down on them. They don't want anybody speaking badly about this product, which is why you hear DW and Jeff Gordon and all these guys during the telecast constantly talking about the Aero this, the track position. They try to make it sound exciting, but it's not. It's not. When I know a guy, once he falls back out of the top 10, they're going to struggle no matter how good their car is. Yeah, you always got that one guy or two guys that their car is just right, like Logano. And even Harvick to an extent throughout the race. Other than that, it was really all about who got track position coming out of the pits, where they restarted. You saw guys finish the race in the top 10 that at times throughout the race were in the top 20, top 25. And it was because they worked it out in a way where they ended up at the end, at that last restart, to be in a good spot. Suarez, he ran in the top 10 early, but then he fell back and he struggled. He was in the top 20, then he was in the top 25 for a while, and he never seemed to make a move. But then there was this, a couple of guys pitted late or stayed out on a caution, then they had to pit early, and there was a lot of things going on, and it shuffled the deck a bit. And then once towards the end of the race, he got back in the top 10, he was able to fight and stay up there. And on that last restart, I think he started 6th, and he ended up 4th, because he really had a decent restart, and he was able to hold that position. But it was all about track position. And if he didn't work his way up through strategy, he wouldn't have had such a good finish. And the same goes for a lot of guys that finished up front. Larson had a fast car, and he ended up, all the way in the back, because once he lost that track position, he was never able to work his way back up. So that's racing? Not to me. And I don't know, man. To me, it's all about, having the car on edge, not being able to run wide open. You shouldn't be able to run wide open at most of these tracks. That's a problem. And as long as this continues, you're going to get this. And yeah, you are going to get some great races from time to time in spite of this package, if all the other conditions fall into place. And that Kansas race was fantastic. There's no denying it. And we have had some pretty good races this year. This has, for the most part, been on the positive side. But we've also had some huge stinkers. And yeah, I know a lot of people say that historically Pocono and Michigan and these races, they've never really been that great. But they've never been this bad either. And I don't want to see these conga lines. I don't want to see where guys are just, fuck it, I ain't taking tires, or I'll just take 2 because I want that track position. And then a guy with 4 fresh tires that's a few cars behind them can't pass them. And the biggest thing this Aero package was supposed to address was being able to pass the leader. So yeah, it keeps the leader closer to the rest of the pack, but you still can't pass. So who gives a shit? And you see cars get up to the bumper. So they're good enough to get up to them and catch them, but not pass. You hit a wall. The car stalls out. And this is similar problem to what we already had before this Aero package, but I think they made it worse. To me, this Aero stuff is worse. The dirty air, the having to worry about track position, the car stalling out when you try to take a lead and you hit a wall of air. It's worse. This is worse than it's ever been. So that's all I'm going to say about it. I don't want to keep talking about this, but I had to get it off my chest. If you disagree, let me know. This is just my opinion. Maybe you thought it was great. Maybe you think it's the racing's good. And if you do feel that way, then I'm happy for you. I really am. If it turns out that viewership goes up noticeably, not just a little bit, but like it's a big jump in viewership, and people are excited about this Aero package racing, this kind of racing, then you know what? It doesn't matter what I think, because I'm just one guy. But I don't think that's the case. I think that we've had some great races this year, and some of it is, yeah, the Aero package plays a part in it. I'm not saying it has nothing to do with it, but if it doesn't coincide with just the right temperature and track conditions and tire wear and all these other factors, if all of those things are not checked off, it's hit and miss. And just because you just finished watching an awesome race doesn't mean like, okay, the Aero package is wonderful. Did you forget all the bad races before that? I'm telling you, I went to Richmond and it was odd. It was odd watching the same cars around each other all day, not being able to pass each other. Short tracks are supposed to be all about passing. I don't know, man. These package has no place and has no business being run at most of these tracks. And the one place, like I said, I walked away and I said, okay, that Aero package is perfect for this. And that was Talladega. So, I don't know. I'm interested to know what you guys think. I'm sorry I dragged this on too long. But I don't want to keep talking about this every week. And I think I was right. I talked about it last year after the All-Star race, and I warned everybody. I said, be careful what you wish for. This is not going to work everywhere. It works at the All-Star race because there's 100 different factors that come into play. It's nighttime, cooler temperatures. There's 1,000 restarts. There's all these different stages. The race is very short, so you get a lot of these short sprints and restarts, and that creates a lot of excitement. But then you go to a normal race, much longer races, you don't get that same experience. So you can't look at the All-Star race and say, hey, we can do this everywhere. That's not how it works. And I warned everybody, and I think I can honestly, I can say, I told you so. Do we really need to see more and more and more to say, hey, maybe, there's something we don't know? We've seen almost every type of racing there is in Cup this year. We've seen short tracks, flat, big, small, high banks, worn, smooth tracks. So we should know what this Aero package is by now. And I think if you're observant, you got to admit, this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And just because this package does work well at some tracks under certain conditions, is not, I don't get it. And yeah, if you get these cars all bunched up, was that fun watching that? Just because they weren't all spread out? What difference does it make if Joey Logano had a 6-second lead to win the race, or it came down to a couple of feet when you knew that guy behind him was never going to pass him? And if you watched the race early on, you knew Joey Logano, unless he screwed something up or his team and he didn't have track position, as long as he had track position, he was going to win that race. That was no surprise at all. So that's not exciting. So what if they're all bunched up in a pack? You guys have a good day. Let me know what you think. I look forward to your comments.